Hey folks, today we have an awesome guest on the show, Jim Bisenius. He have built really cool companies using the power of open source. One of his product called SingleLink has more than 25k users. So if you are into startups, open source and all that, consider watching this video till end.
My father has owned a business since I was born, much longer than that even. He runs one of the largest product safety equipment manufacturers as well as certification facilities in the world. So for me, it was easy. I started my first business as soon as the 5th grade, replacing mailboxes around the neighborhood. And ever since, it's been an afterthought for me. It's not, am I going to start a business? It's what business am I going to start? So I've been repetitively trying and failing as an entrepreneur for the past, I want to say 10 plus years. And my father's been a big influence on me. The WordPress and Angular dev on Upwork and make a good amount of money there. So that led to me starting Neutron Creative, which ended up being a WordPress development agency. And over a few years, we made a lot of WordPress projects. And when we went to starting our own product, we went in the direction of, again, using WordPress. Why? Because it was open source. It was the only thing we could do because we needed to build on something and not start something from fresh. Or at least we were too intimidated to start from scratch at the time. So we rebuilt the WordPress core image. We actually built the world's fastest instantiation system for WordPress. We can install WordPress thousands of times in milliseconds. Other people, like if you start a WordPress website from GoDaddy today, it'll take minutes to possibly an hour to get that site ready for you. We could do thousands in quarter second. And that led to a big reason thought for us. Like the reason why WordPress has gotten so big is because of this open source ecosystem that anybody could build on. And so as a sidecar project to the things we were building, we decided that we were going to launch this project that I built overnight in WordPress called SingleLink. And SingleLink was the open source link tree alternative. And the actual only reason it was open source to start was because I built it on WordPress. And WordPress is licensed with GPL, so everything after it has to be licensed with GPL. So we licensed SingleLink with GPL and moved forward from there. And it was only until after we've been in the open source community for months that we started to realize how valuable the open source community was. And we started to understand why you would actually decide to go open source. So yeah, it's an interesting perspective from us because, again, I like to say we went open source by accident, but we're so glad to be here. Yeah, so I started my online career at 12 years old, working for, must have been 12 or 13. Shout out to Jeffrey Morris Jr. for hiring me off of Upwork at 12. I don't think it was until way after he actually realized I was 12 years old. So it was pretty crazy. We worked together for a few years. But I had started my first business before that. So I started my first business in the 5th grade at 10 years old. And I had made several $1,000s over the course of 30 days running that business over winter break. So once I started programming, for me, I was actually too young to get a work permit and go work for somebody in my city. So, I started off just being a sole proprietor and just doing contract development. And so you can see how these two skill sets, one never really grew because of another. They just kind of grew together entirely. I've always been learning how to be a business leader alongside how to be a programmer. And naturally that has led me to being a technical founder that builds what I found. So it's an interesting question because traditionally, I think open source is so hard to find funding for. And this commercial open source market, which are businesses that are not just open source, I like to consider a lot of these open source businesses basically charity. They don't have a financial model. Their financial model is to donate until we don't have to worry about a financial model. And that's not the look for open source that I like to see. It's not that I don't love it and value it, and I use all sorts of libraries on a daily basis that would not be possible. I would not be able to build what I do without these types of tools. But commercial open source software is just such a rapidly growing category. And shout out to people like Commercial Open Source Capital, who are really, bringing funding to this industry and helping push these. I mean, you've seen products like, again, Athens Research, Calenso. I mean, these projects are taking massive traction in just the first few months of launch. I mean, again, we're getting Y Combinator backing more open source projects. Athens Research just ran a massive round with caffeinated capital. So it's an interesting perspective. To date, we have $90,000 in fundraising that we've just done from my father. It's been a very easy process to go through that. And I've been very grateful to have that capital accessible to me because, traditionally we could go through other routes, but the offers there have been so low. Like, being able to get capital from a bank is not an easy option for an open source company. And especially when you know that the industry is seeing multi-billion-dollar market caps, you're not going to go to a bank or an investor, or at least it would be smart if you have the accessibility and the opportunity to not go to a bank or investor and get those loans that pin you at such a low market cap, et cetera. And that has helped us get to the point where we're now just about to start raising this pre-seed round, a 400K pre-seed round. We have some committed, but can't really talk much about it right now. And that's going to help carry us out to the next year and get profitability. So like I said, we're pre-revenue. It's a tough subject, but with more venture capital coming into this open source category, I think it gets easier every single day. And I think that's the biggest thing we can do, because open source projects, they depend on, capturing a little bit of the massive amount of value they create, which compared to most SaaS projects, which are just charge a lot and do little, it's a very different way of structuring things. And it's a lot harder for these projects to bootstrap the beginnings of it. Yeah, absolutely. So for those who are unaware, Single Link is the open source Linktree alternative. And we've got over 2,500 microsites hosted on our website to date. We launched publicly in September, and we've been full-time on it for just a few months now. So it's not until recently where our team actually decided this is something we want to pursue. We want to drop everything we're doing and commit to this full-time. So as the open source Linktree alternative and microsite platform, it was, again, an afterthought to even launch this. We were thinking of what are the things that could make the most amount of money and cost the least to make. And we looked at Linktree just as this blaring example of, man, these guys haven't done much in years to their roadmap. Like, we could come out in 6 months and just blow them away. The category is multiplying every single month. I mean, how can we not enter this category right now? It was, we had all these other ideas. And if you look through our GitHub, you can find like 60 or 70 projects that we worked on before we actually decided this was the go-to one. And it just, the microsite market was screaming for an open source alternative. Not like Linktree isn't, they're valuable in its own way, but they had no real open source offering. And that's something that I strongly believe almost every single market needs. I think the biggest thing that I didn't even realize when starting open source projects is that closed source, again, the model of closed source is to capture a ton of value out of what you create, but you're actually going to create very little value. The open source model in comparison is do as much as you can, change the world, build software that's going to be used by millions of people on a daily basis, and then just try to make a few of them pay. So it's the value proposition is that you reach so many more people that would never be able to use the software. They are able to do so much more with the software that they could never, ever do with closed source software. To date, we have if you look at Linktree, they only have like 11 themes, I believe, for their free users. To date, we have people who've created like 600 plus themes on our platform. So we have over 30 active forks. So people have been, creating these forks. They try new things, et cetera. We have people who want to create their own versions of Single Link. Again, a lot of self-hosting audience, and we are unable to track those users. So the value we've already created in such little time is so much more massive than any of the closed source organizations are able to do. I strongly recommend, there are a lot of open source projects that are really blowing up in this space. Check out Commercial Open Source Software Capital. They are posting new awesome software daily, and they're announcing all sorts of awesome VC launches into the space. Check out Athens Research. I mean, the story of Jeff Tang building Athens Research. I don't know if you know of this, but the founder of Rome Research told Jeff Tang to start Athens Research. He did. And Rome Research was never able to get YC funding, and Athens Research did. So that's a win for open source there. Check out Kelenso. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but they are a huge project that just came out of On Deck, I believe. And again, a massive, massive project. They were trending on GitHub just a few days ago. They have thousands of stars, if I recall. So it seems like open source is winning all over the place right now. And I love to see it. So if I was wanting to get into open source today, and I think it's a great question to ask me because I only got into open source 6 months ago when I started Single Link. I actually made minimal open source contributions before that, or I did, but they were only incidental. They were only open source because WordPress was open source. They were not me intending to be in the open source space. I would just start building and publishing code. And I would act like I'm building closed source projects, and I would just open source them. Because I think that open source can be so intimidating to so many people, thinking that you have to come into a massive project and you have to fit this culture. And there's not a lot of guidelines on how to fit this culture, how to make this perfect pull request or how to do this. And maybe there are, but they're so long, intimidating. And, maybe that's a great way for a lot of people to get involved. And I love that. But I think the best thing you can do right now is just start a project, finish it, and open source it. That's the best thing you could do absolutely all day, every single day. Just create value, because I think you'll look back at projects. If none create traction, just keep creating new projects every single month. Create a new project, create a new project. And eventually you'll look back and you'll realize, whoa, somebody ended up forking this. It ended up getting this many downloads, or somebody ends up using some little portion of the code from that. It's so easy to create value in open source accidentally. So just start publishing code.
That's it, folks. You made it to the end. If you find this episode useful, feel free to follow him on Twitter @Jim Bisenius. And also subscribe to this channel for more content. Bye-bye.